Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And back with me, Gayatri.
Remember the 5th of November. Most British people do, and all of my life it has been accompanied by a cacophony of fireworks and the blaze of bonfires. What is less well remembered is what it's all about.
On the 5th of November 1605, it was gunpowder treason and plot. Guy Fawkes, or Guido to give him his Sunday name, entered Parliament with the intention of blowing up the king and all of his ministers. Nowadays, the crime would be described as religiously aggravated by the fact that Guy and his fellow conspirators were Roman Catholics, whose terrorism, and it was almost the most spectacular act of terrorism in history, was motivated by the extreme anti-Catholic repression then present in Britain.
Joining us to discuss the gunpowder plot is Joe Cook, whose grandfather wrote one of the very first books broadly sympathetic to the man, if not his methods. I'm glad to say Joe is on board the Sputnik. Let's start, Joe, with what happened. What was planned to happen on November the 5th, 1605?
Well, essentially, a group of conspirators got together to blow up Parliament. They wanted to effectively kill the lords and the politicians that were making their lives hell, and in the process assassinate the royal family and have them eventually replaced with a Catholic monarch.
That's a spectacular plot. How close did it come to succeeding?
Very close. In fact, it was only a matter of hours before the bomb was set to blow, although it had been planned for, a year and a half, 2 years beforehand. And
how was it foiled? Did they have inside intelligence? Were they reading their emails?
It's possible that there's a few theories kind of bounded about. One is that there was a tip-off warning letter sent to a previously Catholic lord who sounded the alarm. Another one, which the book kind of talks about quite a lot, is that the government had an insider within the conspirators.
I don't think they would have allowed the plot to go that far if they actually had an insider in the ranks.
Well, that's possible, although the distribution and making of gunpowder was a government monopoly. So it's recorded at the Ministry of Defence. If there's any kind of sale or distribution of large quantities, it's recorded. However, in the months preceding the gunpowder plot, those records have mysteriously disappeared and haven't been found since.
Oh, wow. So what kind of man was Guy Fawkes?
Well, he was a very religious man. He was extremely brave and determined. When he was fighting in Holland as a foreign fighter alongside Catholic armies, his commanding officer said of him, he was a man of great piety, exemplary temperaments. He was a faithful friend, an enemy of broils and disputes, but most notably said that he was remarkably punctual for his religious attendance. So extremely religious man, but extremely brave nonetheless.
And so he came back from Europe to effectively join the struggle here.
That's right.
He changed his identity, didn't he?
Yes, he had to use his alias of John Johnson because he built up such a reputation for his name on the continent. He'd also been given command of a company.
I must say Guy Fawkes is a far better name than John Johnson.
I think so. He even managed to personally petition the King of Spain and ask for help in defending Catholics at home in England. Of course, the requests weren't granted, and on returning home to England 12 years later, that's when he met with the Catholic resistance, or as they became known, the conspirators.
Joe, tell us more about the conspirators, what his role was within this group.
Yes, so the conspirators were 13 men, 10 of whom related by blood, Guy not included. Again, you couldn't describe them as ordinary criminals or rogues or terrorists. They were all nobles or gentry, landowners. The ringleader, Robert Gatsby, his own grandfather had served in the as Speaker in the House of Commons.
The Speaker of
the
Speaker,
yeah.
And the Chancellor, apparently. So they couldn't be described as ordinary criminals, and they particularly chose Guy because of his reputation as a fearsome fighter, extremely brave, but also he had the knowledge how to store safely gunpowder, and he knew how to build bombs, something that these gents didn't exactly know how to do.
And what happened to him then after he was captured?
So once Guy was captured, he was taken to the Tower of London. By midnight, it said he was being examined. Examined, of course, was code word for tortured. And the senior interrogators at the time said of him that he was quite remarkable. He seemed completely unbreakable, unintimidated. They said he was constant, calm and settled. Guy kept his wits about him. He said that they had no authority to examine him, and that the king was neither his lawful sovereign nor appointed by God. Essentially, Guy was saying that he was acting out of duty, conscience and religion, and had no trouble with this at all.
And how serious was the torture?
Well, Guy was tortured for 4 days on the rack. Usually they said that just the threat of torture would make people confess, but it took 4 days of severe torture, personally authorised by King James, before he began to name names and confess. Once he'd named names, apparently Guy was then tortured severely for another 2 months out of revenge, personally sanctioned by King James.
And sentenced to death? What kind of death?
Well, he was to be hung, drawn, quartered, etc. But on top of that, because his sins were so grave, it was said that his head had to be decapitated because his thoughts were so wicked. His heart removed because he was so impure. His genitals removed because they didn't want the offspring of the devil, and so on. So he was debowed and his body was pulled in 4 parts, and they said it should be left for the birds to eat.
Sounds a bit like ISIS.
Worse than, possibly.
Worse than, yeah. Even ISIS didn't think of all of that. And yet, his name liveth on. I don't know how many people in my lifetime have, and I have myself many times, put a guy on top of the bonfire without actually knowing who the guy really was. And yet, it's still, until this week, celebrated Guy Fawkes Night.
Yes. Testament to how close he became, actually, to blowing up Parliament, I think.
Well, they used to joke when I first entered Parliament that the last man to enter Parliament with good intentions was Guy Fawkes. Yeah. How would it have changed the course of history in Britain if he'd succeeded?
Well, if they'd succeeded in bombing Parliament, first of all, they would have had to been successful in killing most of the royal family. And if they'd done that, then they would have to again have been successful in replacing them with a Catholic royal family. So it's anyone's guess, really, as to how it would have all turned out eventually.
I have trodden the boards underneath which the barrels, beer barrels, weren't they, filled with gunpowder, were settled. I give what I call the Guy Fawkes tour of Parliament, the alternative tour. How did they get in to Parliament and underneath where the king would be putting on his throne at the state opening?
Well, again, this is thanks to one of the conspirators, a Thomas Percy. He was a civil servant, so he had access to the House of Lords and Parliament. He was able to rent out rooms, and so he did this on behalf of the conspirators. And once they were in this room, it was Guy Fawkes' job to organise a mining operation, which was to transport these big kegs of what looked like beer, but was gunpowder hidden beneath them, into a room just beneath the House of Lords.
This very week, there were thousands of Guy Fawkes running around central London. The Million Mask March, the mask of Anonymous, is modelled on the face of Guy Fawkes. So not only has his name lived for centuries, even his face, his impression, has lived. Do you think, in a sense, there's, as your grandfather would have clearly liked, there's a partial rehabilitation, at least an understanding of why Guy Fawkes did what he did?
I think so. I mean, his name is synonymous with revolution, and so he kind of invokes that tradition in people.
And it's worldwide as well, I understand. It was not just London where the mask marched in their millions or thousands.
There was a Million Mask March across the world. That's right. And all of them were wearing Guy Fawkes' face.
Quite a legacy, I would say.
I'd say so.
It is. I think he's remembered more than the king he tried to blow up. Even I don't know which particular king that was. He was a foreign fighter. Nowadays, he would have been arrested on arrival back in the country as a foreign fighter. And of course, there are many people who would now conspire to blow up, if not the Queen, God forbid, then certainly the Parliament. The Parliament is in very low odour, but nothing like then. the repression of the Roman Catholic faith in 1605 could scarcely be exaggerated. Priests, nuns, bishops hanged, persecuted, tortured, and the Catholic Church driven underground, literally into the forests.
That's right. I mean, as a Catholic, you were under curfew, so you weren't allowed to leave the area. The law stated that you must go to a Protestant church. And as a young man, Guy even knew someone who was executed just for saying Mass. On top of that, you know, just for the very fact of asking for leniency upon Catholics could get you a £1,000 fine, body parts chopped off and imprisoned.
It's a remarkable story. It is amazing that all these fireworks go off and nobody really knows why the 5th of November, why the Guy Fawkes night, why it's a guy on top of the bonfire. But I found the book absolutely fascinating. It's out of print now, I'm guessing. But there are other revisionist histories since that one. But it was an important one at the time. So I'm really grateful to your grandfather and to you for bringing us up to date on the real Guy Fawkes. Thanks, Joe Cook. Coming up after the break, the morals of Evo Morales. We'll be right back.